Stonehenge, the most famous of all megalithic monuments, remains silent. For centuries we have tried to unlock its secrets.
President Obama went to visit it and said it should be on everybody's bucket list. So I don't know if he's planning to leave us shortly or... Anyway, he's been to see Stonehenge recently. And what's amazing about this monument is the size of the stones, enormous stones, the fact that there are these lintel stones which are placed above, and the architecture looks like Greek architecture, it looks like something from history, whereas this monument comes from prehistory. It's dated to about 2500 BC, before Christ, so it's contemporary to the Great Pyramid. And there is no written knowledge about this monument. There is nothing that's come down to us directly about this monument. It's been inspiring for many people. Many people have gone there to write poetry or whatever. And what I'm going to talk to you about this evening is principally why it is where it is, why this monument was actually put at this particular spot, and how this can be proven, in fact, how I can actually prove this. So first of all, I'll present the different monuments, because the major stone monument in the center is what's well known. But there are other monuments around it. So I'll present the different monuments. Then I'll talk about the dimensions, the size, because that's very interesting. Because the Stonehenge has a particular size. And also the geometry involved, a simple geometry. And then I'll talk about the link between the different monuments. And then I'll show a sort of general plan of the whole thing to finish off with. And then if you have any questions... So this is, I'll go rather fast, you know. This is a 3D plan of the monument. The outer circle here, these stones here, they're called the Sarsen stones. They've been carried about 40 miles from the north. There's a big plain there where they were left by glaciers. And they're massive stones. They can weigh up to 50 tons, 60 tons. And so they were carried or transported over a very long distance to be brought to this particular spot. Those stones in this diagram are numbered from 1 to 30. And then the lintels, that's the name of the stones horizontally placed above them. And initially, all these Sarsen stones, these 30 Sarsen stones, had lintels on top. And that's what gives you this outer circle, as you can see. Can you see that? This is the outer circle. That's called the Sarsen circle. Okay. Now, inside that is some smaller stones, which we can see here, these stones. They're called the blue stones. They're numbered from 31 to 49. And they come from Wales. North Wales, from the Preseli Mountains, about 130 kilometers away, as the crow flies. So rather, you know, I don't think crows brought them there. So the path would have been a lot longer. And that's one of the very big mysteries of Stonehenge, is why, well, how and why were 60 stones weighing around 5 tons transported right across from North Wales to the south of England at a time when there were no roads, and you know, that's a very big mystery. Of course, people tried to say that maybe they'd been dropped there by glaciers or whatever, but it's quite obvious that they weren't. So there's that circle, the inner circle. And then there are the massive, what are called trilithon. Lith in Latin means stone. So megalith means big stone. And trilithon or trilithon means 3 stones. And so these are these big stones here, these ones. They're called the trilithons because they're made of 3 stones, 2 vertical and a lintel. And they are taller. You can see, look, they are taller than the others. They're absolutely massive. So they're on the inside. And then inside of those, well, there's the lintels on the top of those. And then inside those, there's a horseshoe shape of blue stones. These blue stones, you can see them just here. They're just inside the trilithons, and they are in a horseshoe shape. And I'll show you some pictures of those. This map, this very good plan of Stonehenge and the 3D image was done by Anthony Johnson in this book called Solving Stonehenge. It's very useful to have detailed plans like this. Now, there's another stone I haven't talked about, number 80 there. It's called the altar stone. When you visit Stonehenge, if you have the chance to go inside the monument, you can easily miss this because it's on the ground and it's got other stones lying on top of it. But this stone is perpendicular, exactly perpendicular towards summer solstice sunrise. I don't have the whole of my wording on the screen there, which is a bit of a pity. Well, anyway, that's summer solstice sunrise on the right there. And so this stone in the ground is perpendicular. You've got a photograph of it here on the ground. You see it? Yeah. Look. Above it are 2 stones. On top of it are 2 stones which have fallen. On the left, it's one of the trilithon verticals, and then a lintel, a trilithon lintel. And so it's easy to miss that stone. It's called the altar stone. Here are some pictures of the exterior sarsen circles and the blue stones here inside. They don't look blue, but bluestone is very hard. It's volcanic rock. It only exists in one place in the British Isles. That's why we're sure where it comes from. And it can actually be polished and made into jewelry. It's so hard that it can be made into polished jewelry. And then you can see it's blue, right? This is rough stone. And right on the right here, you have one of these massive trilithons with a blue stone inside again. These little stones here, the blue stones. So there's some link being made between the sarsen stones made of one kind of stone and then the blue stones inside. There's some sort of connection between these 2 types of material. This is a photograph which was taken last year during dry weather. And it's very interesting because it shows the dry patches where the disappeared stones used to be placed. Okay? This actually happened because the man whose job it was to water the grass, his hose pipe was too short and he couldn't get right across to this side. So he watered all of this side, and this side was unfortunately not watered because his pipe was too short. But in fact, that enabled him to make one of the most important discoveries at Stonehenge for a long time. So it's a gardener, in fact, who discovered that you can see the dry patches where the stones used to be. Amazing. Yeah. Here's a photograph of these lintels. You can see how well they are brought together here. You know, this is very well sculpted stone. I'll go into this a bit later. And then on the right, you can see there's a little sort of bump on the top of that stone. So the thing about Stonehenge is it's built like a carpenter would build things, with the notches and what's it called? Does anybody know the name? You know, where you yeah, put together things. Yeah, I'll tell you in a minute. But anyway, sorry? Tongue and groove, yeah, for example. That's another thing. But anyway, that's one of the very special things about Stonehenge, is that all these stones were actually sculpted in specifically and all measured to be put up there and create this perfect circle. Now we talk about tongue and groove, so you can see the notch right at the top of the big trilithon stone. And then in front of it you have the blue stone, like I say, very hard stone, and you can see how here it's been polished and sculpted to make that groove all the way down it. But it's not known what that groove may have been for. And here again you can see the notch at the top. And what I want to show you here is on this lintel stone. If you look in that circle, you can see that the stone has actually been, it's got the flat bottom here, and it's been, a little layer has been taken off here to adjust the height. Can you see that?
Yes.
Yeah. So the actual finished level of the stones was perfectly level. Once the monument was finished, the stones were perfectly level. It has the same degree of levelness as a billiard table, or a snooker table, or whatever you call it, a pool table. Okay? So you can see how this was all adjusted in 3 dimensions to come to this fantastic result. And it also serves as a perch for birds. Here you can see the notches, and this is a lintel stone from a trilithon. This is the altar stone underneath here. And so you can see how those notches were formed.
There's one stone here that has that first.
Oh, some of the stones in Karnak, you can see that kind of thing, but not in any way the way that they were done here in Stonehenge. So here you have a plan of how these things were put together with the tongue and groove. They had the tongue and groove part here. So the lintel stones were linked together horizontally with tongue and groove so that they were perfectly fixed together. And then underneath with this system to make sure that they wouldn't move when they were on the top. Now, the lintel stones are all curved. And so that means that the size of the circle was known before this whole thing was started. This must have been planned, perfectly planned. There are 30 lintel stones, so the circle was divided into 30 parts. The actual curve was decided, and all these stones were sculpted exactly according to the curve on the plans. Okay? Now that's something very interesting. You know, this is real architecture, complex architecture on this sort of scale, but it's done with these massive stones. Today, we'd have a lot of trouble doing this, especially getting the end result perfectly level. Stonehenge has different phases. The monument we've just looked at is more recent, dates from 2500, but before that, for thousands of years, things were going on at Stonehenge. I won't go into all the details of that, but I want to look at the first, what's called the first phase of the actual Stonehenge monument. This is this phase. The first thing that was done was building a sort of trench, a circular trench, and then with a trench with the hills on either side, the sort of the tumps on either side. So at one point we just have the ditch and the bump, and at other points it's on either side. Okay, this is dated to 3000 BC, and what's very interesting here, I'll come back on this, is that there are specific, there's a specific relationship between the sun angle at solstice and a moon angle at what's called the major moon. I'll come back to that, but that's a very important point, because this was only true at this particular time, at this particular place. Okay? And that is present from minus 3,000. There's the major moon rise. This happens every 18.6 years. The next time will be 2025. So, you know, if you want to come back to Karnak in 2025, you'll be able to see this alignment in certain lines along here. Happens every 18.6 years. That's the year that the full moon at winter solstice spends the longest time in the sky and goes up the highest. You see it the most vertical at midnight. Now, the land around Stonehenge is sloping, as you can see here, which means making a level circle on the top with the lintels is all that much more difficult. And you can see the ditch which has been built around. Here it is, look. So that's in a big circle. That was initially built in a big circle around. And there's a stone there called the Station Stone. I'll come back on that. These are the oldest stones in Stonehenge. They're dated about 3000 BC from the beginning. And there were 4 stones like that called the Station Stones. And they are very, very important. It's incredible to see the amount of information that 4 stones can convey. This is to the south of Stonehenge. It's the coast near Poole to the south of Stonehenge. And why I'm showing this is it's the White Cliffs. The whole of the south of England is chalk. And so as soon as you take the grass off, you get the white chalk underneath. And people have used that fact to actually make drawings on the hillside. You have white horses, for example, which you can see from miles away, where the grass has been taken away, and so you get the white structure underneath. You know. And that dates to, you know, there are some of these are 3,000 years old. And it's the same at Stonehenge. At Stonehenge, as soon as you take away a bit of grass, you're immediately in the chalk. Now, chalk is quite soft, so it's quite easy to dig into. It's not like granite. And so that enables you to make nice holes to place stones in. Okay? So it's quite handy for that. And inside this ditch that was built around Stonehenge, John Aubrey in 1666 discovered a ring, a circle, made of these little circular holes. Now, when I say little, they're not all that little. Some of them are this deep. Okay, some of them are up to 5 feet deep. And they go from about 2 feet to 6 feet wide. And they're circular, and they go straight down, and they have flat bottoms. So, of course, it is thought that maybe big wooden posts were put into them. But, of course, we have no real idea about what this was going on. But what we do know is that there are 56 holes in a circle. So imagine, you know, you have a big party, you bring a massive pizza, and you have to cut it into 56 parts, right? How are you going to do that? How would you go about dividing a circle into 56? I'll come back onto that later, but you can't just do it by accident, okay? This number 56 is very important. It's very important. Now, I've put a ring around this bit because it's the only spot where the holes are not exactly well spaced. These holes are all well spaced around the circle, and then there's one spot where here you can see this isn't in the middle. It should be more here, and it's not in the middle. So there's one spot where they're not very well spaced. So the holes, like I said, are 2.5 to 6 feet wide, 2 to 5 feet deep, so they can be that deep. They have a flat bottom. There's very little irregularity in their spacing, just this particular spot. It's a precise circle, 288 feet in diameter. And the average distance between the holes is 16 feet. Which is interesting, very interesting, because 16 is an important number, and I'll come on to this later, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if the English foot was used at the time of Stonehenge. The greatest radial error is 19 inches, which gives a precision for this circle of 99.83%. So it's very precise as a circle. That's very important. And the greatest interval error, which is here, is 53.3 centimeters. And it has been said that the precise placing of 56 holes around the circumference of such a large circle is a considerable achievement of engineering. That was G.S. Hawkins, who wrote that in a book called Stonehenge Decoded in 1965. Here's another plan of Stonehenge, and of course, the second, what I showed you earlier, these station stones, they were actually placed at 4 positions on this circle. So you have the 56 holes on the circle, and then outside of those holes, 4 standing stones were placed in that particular spot. 2 of them are still standing. This one and this one are still standing. But the exact position of these 2 stones is very well known because you have the hole in the chalk. So that's a big advantage of this monument, is that even if a stone disappears, you see the trace in the ground of where it was. So these 4 station stones, which were put there at about 3000 BC, create a rectangle inside the circle, the 56 holes. It's very interesting to note that the stone circle, the central stone circle here, actually sort of slips into that, although this was built apparently 500 years later. So that's quite interesting. Apparently they planned well in advance. But what's even more interesting about this is that this is not any old geometry. These haven't been placed by chance. These 4 stones actually give a precise kind of geometry. So I'll go into that in a minute.